A warrior came from the stars, claiming he was a father. The twin suns cast long shadows across the barren landscape when she appeared like a mirage born from ancient legends. Captain Elias Vaughn had seen many things during his years in the borderlands, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of the alien warrior standing before him. Tall, fierce, and heartbreakingly beautiful, despite the battle scars that told stories of survival. Her armor, though faded and worn, couldn't hide the graceful strength of her form. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of unspoken secrets and 7 years of silence. "Meet your son." The words hit him harder than any plasma blast. Elias stared at her, searching for recognition in features that seemed carved from starlight and shadow. Behind her, a small figure emerged, a boy with violet eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them, and a face that was unmistakably a blend of human and something otherworldly. I don't know you," Elias whispered, though his heart hammered against his ribs with a strange, familiar rhythm. Her expression remained stoic, but something flickered in those mesmerizing eyes. Hurt, perhaps, or disappointment. "You don't remember me," she said, her voice softer now. "But I remember you." The boy stepped forward with the fearless curiosity of youth, holding out a weathered photograph. Elias's military ID, creased and faded from time and touch. His throat constricted as memories began to stir like dust devils in his mind. 7 years, she continued, and her voice carried the melody of desert winds. 7 years since Trexa Prime. 7 years since you lay dying in that cave. And I... She paused, vulnerability cracking through her warrior's mask. "I saved your life." Fragments of memory crashed over him like waves. A cave lit by bioluminescent moss. Gentle hands tending his wounds. A voice singing in an alien tongue that had somehow soothed his fevered dreams. And eyes. Those same haunting eyes that now watched him with a mixture of hope and resignation. "You were kind to me," she whispered, and for the first time her voice trembled. "Even in delirium you didn't call me savage. You told me about Earth. About stars that looked like diamonds, about rain that tasted like freedom." Elias's breath caught. He remembered now. Fragments. Pieces of a puzzle that had haunted his dreams. The way she had hummed while cleaning his wounds. How she had shared her precious water. The gentle touch that had pulled him back from death's embrace. "What's your name?" he asked the boy, crouching to meet those incredible violet eyes. "Kaylin," the child replied with quiet dignity. "Mother says I'm strong like you." Looking at this unexpected son, then back at the warrior woman who had crossed impossible distances to find him, Elias felt something shift in his chest, like a lock turning, like a door opening to let light flood a room that had been dark for far too long. That night, as the refugee camp settled into uneasy sleep, Elias found himself unable to rest. The warrior, she had finally told him her name was Zarakai, sat vigil at the camp's perimeter, her silhouette outlined against the star-drunk sky. Even in repose, she radiated a dangerous elegance that made his pulse quicken in ways he didn't dare examine. He approached slowly, learning already that sudden movements made her hand drift toward weapons that were never far from reach. "Can't sleep either?" She turned, and starlight caught the elegant curve of her jaw, the full softness of lips that seemed at odds with her warrior's bearing. "Sleep is a luxury I've rarely afforded myself." "And now?" Elias settled beside her, careful to maintain respectful distance even as his body yearned to move closer. "You're safe here." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Safe. I'm not sure I remember what that word means." They sat in comfortable silence, both watching Kaylin sleep peacefully among the other children. The boy had adapted with remarkable ease, his laughter already weaving through the camp like music. "You raised him well," Elias said softly. "He's incredible." Pride and pain warred in her expression. "He is everything good that came from that terrible time. When I discovered I carried your child, She paused, vulnerability cracking through her defenses. "I was terrified. My people, they would not understand. A warrior bearing the child of a human, an enemy. I was never your enemy, Elias said, turning to face her fully. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. No, she whispered, her eyes finding his in the darkness. You were something far more dangerous. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Elias found himself remembering more. Not just the cave and his injuries, but the way she had looked at him when she thought he was unconscious. The tender touches that had lingered longer than medical necessity required. The soft words in her native tongue that had sounded like prayers or promises. Zara. He said her name like a reverent whisper, and she shivered at the sound. What you did, raising him alone, protecting him, you're the strongest person I've ever known. Her warrior's mask slipped completely then, revealing the woman, beneath beautiful, vulnerable, and achingly alone. Strength born of necessity is not the same as courage, Elias. I was a coward. I should have found you sooner, should have told you about Kaylin years ago. You're here now, he said, his hand hovering inches from hers. That's what matters. She looked down at the space between their hands, at the chasm that seemed both infinite and bridgeable. I don't know how to be anything other than a soldier. Then, maybe, Elias said gently, it's time to learn. When she finally let him take her hand, her fingers intertwined with his like they had been crafted to fit together. The weeks that followed brought subtle transformations. Zara began removing her armor during the day, though she never ventured far without weapons. Elias pretended not to notice how she moved like liquid grace through the camp, how other survivors' eyes followed her with a mixture of respect and fascination. But it was the small moments that undid him completely, like when she helped in the camp kitchen, her warrior's precision making her unexpectedly gifted at preparing meals, or when she sat cross-legged on the ground, teaching Kaylin traditional fighting stances, her laughter ringing like silver bells when the boy tumbled over his own feet. You're staring again, she said one evening, not looking up from where she was braiding her long, dark hair. They had fallen into a routine of meeting after Kaylin's bedtime, ostensibly to discuss their son's progress, but increasingly just to be near each other. Heat crept up Elias's neck. I was thinking. Dangerous habit. Her eyes sparkled with humor, and he realized how much he'd grown to love these glimpses of the woman behind the warrior. I was thinking about that night in the cave, he admitted. Not just the injuries or the fever, other things. The way you sang to me, how safe I felt when you were near. Her hands stilled in her hair. You remember that? More every day. He moved closer, drawn by the magnetic pull that seemed to exist between them. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, even in that dim light. I thought I was hallucinating. Zara's breath caught. You were delirious with fever. Maybe. Or maybe I was seeing clearly for the first time in my life. The space between them seemed to vibrate with possibility. She was so close he could see. The flecks of gold in her violet eyes could smell the exotic scent that clung to her skin, something like night-blooming flowers and ozone. Elias, she whispered, his name a plea and a warning. I know, he said softly. I know all the reasons why we shouldn't. Different species, different worlds, a war that barely ended. But Zara... He reached up to touch her cheek, marveling when she didn't pull away. None of that changes how I feel when I look at you. Her eyes fluttered closed at his touch. And how is that? Like I've been holding my breath for 7 years and can finally breathe again. When she opened her eyes, they blazed with an emotion that made his heart race. You don't know what you're saying, what you're asking. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, he assured her. I'm just hoping that maybe I feel what I remember from that cave, maybe you felt it too. Her answer came not in words, but in the way she leaned into his touch, in the soft sigh that escaped her lips. For the first time since she'd arrived, Zara Kai let herself be vulnerable, let herself want something beyond mere survival. The breakthrough came during a dust storm that forced the entire camp to shelter indoors for 3 days. Confined to close quarters, The careful distance Elias and Zara had maintained became impossible to preserve. On the second night, Kalen woke from a nightmare, crying out in his native tongue, words Elias didn't understand but recognized as terror. Before he could move, Zara was there, gathering their son into her arms, crooning soft reassurances in the melodic language of her people. "What does he dream about?" Elias asked when the boy had finally settled back to sleep between them. "The same things I do," Zara whispered in the darkness. "War, loss, the fear that everything good will be taken away." Her vulnerability in that moment broke something open in Elias's chest. Without thinking, he reached for her, pulling her against him as she began to tremble with suppressed emotion. "Hey," he murmured against her hair. "You're both safe now, I promise." She stiffened initially, her warrior instincts recoiling from comfort, but gradually she melted into his embrace. "You can't promise that, no one can." "Maybe not," he agreed, his arms tightening around her. "But I can promise that whatever comes, you won't face it alone anymore." When she tilted her face up to look at him, tears glittered on her lashes like captured starlight. The sight hit him like a physical blow, this fierce, incredible woman who had faced unimaginable hardships, finally allowing herself to be fragile. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed. "How to trust. How to hope for something beyond survival." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But maybe we can figure it out together." The kiss, when it finally happened, was inevitable as gravity. Soft at first, tentative, a question asked and answered. Then deeper, more urgent, 7 years of longing and loss pouring between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Zara's eyes were wide with wonder and fear. "This is madness." "The best kind," Elias said, stroking her cheek with infinite tenderness. "My people don't. We don't do this. Love is considered a weakness, a distraction from duty." "What do you think?" he asked gently. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "I think," she said finally, "that loving you and Kalen is the strongest thing I've ever done. It terrifies me more than any battle I've fought." Good terrifying or bad terrifying? A small smile tugged at her lips. "I'm still deciding." When she curled against him, her head on his shoulder, and one hand resting over his heart, Elias felt something settle into place, like a compass finally finding true north. Outside, the storm raged, but inside their small shelter, with their son sleeping peacefully beside them, and Zara warm in his arms, he had never felt more at peace. Spring brought unexpected changes to the refugee camp. What had begun as a temporary shelter was evolving into something more permanent, a community where former enemies learned to live as neighbors, where children of different species played together without seeing differences. At the heart of this transformation were Elias, Zara, and Kalen, an unlikely family that had become the symbol of hope for everyone around them. "You've changed," Dr. Sarah Chen, the camp's medical officer, told Elias one morning, as they watched Zara lead a group of children in combat training exercises. "I've never seen you this settled." Elias smiled, unable to take his eyes off the woman who had completely upended his world. "She makes me want to be better than I am." "And her? What do you make her want to be?" It was a good question. Over the months, he'd watched Zara slowly shed the rigid disciplines of a lifetime warrior. She laughed more freely now, touched him, without hesitation let herself be affectionate with Kalen in public. But more than that, she had begun to dream. "I want to build something," she had told him the night before, her voice filled with an excitement he'd never heard from her. "Not just shelters or defenses, something lasting. A school maybe where children like Kalen can learn about both cultures." "Tell me more," he had said, and listened as she painted a vision of the future that took his breath away. Now, watching her work with the children, he saw that future taking shape. Kalen moved among the group like a young ambassador, equally comfortable with human and alien techniques, translating not just language but understanding between the two groups. "Dad!" The boy ran over, face flushed with excitement. Mom says you're going to help us build the new training ground. That's right, Elias confirmed, ruffling Kaylin's hair. The word dad still made his heart skip, even after months of hearing. Zara approached, and Elias felt the familiar flutter in his chest that her presence always caused. Even dusty from training, she was breathtaking. The council approved our proposal, she said, unable to suppress her smile. Construction begins next week. Unable to contain himself, Elias swept her into his arms and spun her around, her laughter ringing across the training ground. When he set her down, she was breathless and radiant. I love you, he said, the words coming as naturally as breathing now. And I love you, she replied, no longer shy about the admission. Both of you. That evening, as they sat together watching, the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Kaylin leaning against Zara while she absently braided flowers into his dark hair, Elias felt the profound contentment of a man who had found his place in the universe. What are you thinking about? Zara asked, noticing his contemplative silence. Forever, he said simply. How it looks exactly like this. 2 years later, the settlement had grown beyond anyone's wildest expectations. The training academy Zara had envisioned was now a thriving institution, drawing students from across the sector. The small refugee camp had become New Eden, a model of interspecies cooperation that drew visitors and diplomats from throughout the galaxy. But for Elias, the most remarkable transformation was in the woman who stood beside him now, resplendent, in traditional ceremonial robes that blended elements of both their cultures. Today was their wedding day, and Zara looked like a queen of two worlds. You're nervous, she observed, adjusting his collar with fingers that trembled slightly. Terrified, he admitted. What if I'm not enough? What if... She silenced him with a kiss that tasted like promises and starlight. You are everything I never dared to dream of, she whispered against his lips. My warrior, my love, my home. The ceremony was held at sunset, with the twin suns painting the sky in brilliant golds and purples. Kaylin, now 9, and impossibly proud, served as their witness, his violet eyes bright with joy as he watched his parents pledge their hearts to each other in words that belonged to no single world, but to the space between stars where love transcended all boundaries. In the darkness of that cave 7 years ago, Elias said during his vows, I thought I was dying. But you didn't just save my life, Zara. You gave me a reason to live. You gave me love. You gave me our son. You gave me a future I never thought possible. Zara's voice was strong and clear as she spoke her own promises. I was raised to be a weapon, taught that emotions were weakness. But loving you, raising our son together, building this new world, I've learned that love isn't weakness. It's the strongest force in the universe, strong enough to end wars, to bridge differences, to create miracles. As they exchanged rings forged from metals of both their worlds, the assembled crowd, humans and aliens standing together, erupted in celebration that could probably be heard from orbit. Later, as the celebration continued around them, the new family of 3 stood apart for a moment, looking up at the star-filled sky. Will you tell me about Earth again? Kaylin asked, as he did every night. Someday, Elias promised, we'll go there together, all 3 of us. And will you show me the warrior temples of your people? He asked Zara. Everyone, she assured him. You are a bridge between worlds, my brave boy. You carry the best of both within you. As shooting stars streaked across the sky like cosmic benedictions, Elias held his wife and son close, marveling at the impossible journey that had brought them together. Love, he had learned, was indeed the strongest force in the universe, strong enough to transform enemies into lovers, strangers into family, and war-torn worlds into gardens where new dreams could take root and flourish among the stars.